What's up guys, my name is Ace, and welcome back to How to Dominate. This is the series where I share tips and tactics to help you dominate the lobby in a particular game mode. Most of these tips are designed for more solo play and individual performance, but a lot of it applies to team tactics as well. In today's episode, I'm going to be sharing how to dominate Safeguard. Let's get into it. Alright guys, so first we'll cover exactly how Safeguard works, and then we'll get into the more specific tips and tactics. So Safeguard is a round-based game. There are 2 different rounds. Each round lasts 5 minutes, and each team gets a turn attacking and defending. On the attacking side, you have a robot. This robot moves when you go close to it. When you get within the escort area of the robot, it will cause it to move. And your goal is to move the robot from your spawn to the enemy's spawn. The robot always takes the exact same route on every map, and like I said, it doesn't move unless somebody is within the escort area, which is a pretty small area surrounding the robot. On the opposite end of that, on the defending team, you have to prevent that robot from being escorted to your base. To do this, you can simply keep the enemy team away from the robot's escort area, meaning the robot will just stand still, and you can also disable the robot by depleting its health. If you're interested in learning the fastest and most effective ways to disable the robot, I did an entire video on this. I did a lot of testing, and I found the best ways to take out that robot. So every time you disable that robot, it takes 15 seconds to reboot, and in that reboot period, it cannot move at all. So it's a great way for shutting down momentum as those people are trying to escort the robot into your base. The scoring in this game mode is very simple. If you manage to escort that robot into the enemy's base, you will score a point. If they manage to stop you, they will score a point. If after 2 rounds, you guys are tied up at 1, so you manage to successfully escort, and then your enemy team managed to successfully escort, or you were both able to successfully defend, then you go into overtime, and with overtime, you play 2 rounds again. Just like with the first 2 rounds, you alternate, so each team gets a chance attacking and defending. The team that's able to escort the robot fastest into the enemy team's portal will win the game. If neither team is able to escort the robot into the enemy portal, then it becomes a draw. Alright, so now that we've got all the basics out of the way for those of you guys that are new to the game mode, let's get into the tips and tactics. And I'm going to be separating this by round, so attacking versus defending. So first off, let's deal with how to dominate while you're attacking or escorting the robot. When you're attacking, the number one mistake that people are making is they think that having multiple people on the robot will make it move faster. This is simply not true. The robot moves at the exact same pace regardless of how many people are piled onto that robot. I did the testing myself. It is a myth that it will move faster if you have more people piled on. So what does this mean for you? If you have a teammate that's already escorting the robot, it should be your job to push up, gain map control, and secure cutoffs. Just to illustrate exactly what I mean here, let's look at the map Hunted, since Hunted seems to be one of the most popular maps for this game mode. Once you get to this area right here, like right in the middle of the map, this is often where it becomes really contested because the enemies have some good areas to set up on. They can set up on this head glitch here, they can set up in the window right here, and they will often shut you down several times in this area because you don't really have any cover while you're escorting here. This is where map control and cutoffs come in. If everyone's just trying to pile on the robot, you're going to be giving up free kills to the enemy team, because once they see that somebody's escorting the robot, they know that you guys are within that escort area, and you're not going to have any cover, so you're just free kills for them. So if you're pushing for map control, you're being, first off, unpredictable, because a lot of players don't expect you to actually push past your own robot. They think you're going to be hanging back, trying to escort with the rest of your team, so you're a little bit more unpredictable, and you're able to take them by surprise a lot of the times. So in this particular scenario, the best way to get the robot through this big open area is to take control of this head glitch. If you control this, now the enemy can't get a line of sight on the robot from this one lane. This makes the escort so much easier. So if you can control this, and then you have a teammate that goes and controls the room, or if you're able to control both yourself, if you're able to rotate back and forth and control both the window as well as that head glitch, it's going to be the easiest escort ever through that open area right there. So this is always my goal as long as somebody on my team is escorting. Now, if nobody else is escorting and they're all pushing up for map control, well, somebody has to escort it. And it's actually not that bad escorting it in this scenario because your teammates are making it so you can escort it without really being contested too much by enemies because they're getting cutoffs and map control. And now, since one of the recent updates, you actually get 50 score every 5 seconds that you escort the robot, as long as you are one of the first 2 people on that escort for that particular movement. So if everybody piles on it, only the first 2 people for that one movement will get the 50 score every 5 seconds. But that adds up really quickly if you really aren't seeing any enemies and you're just walking that robot across the map. You will actually get streaks relatively quickly now with that 50 score per 5 seconds. So obviously, if you're trying to dominate and lead the lobby, you probably don't want to be the guy stuck escorting the robot, because there won't be very many kills to go around, assuming your teammates are pushing up and getting the map control and cutoffs. And if they aren't getting that map control and cutoffs and they're not escorting the robot, well, they're probably pushed back near the robot, so if you push up, that usually encourages one of them to hop on and escort the robot, because somebody's got to do it. But, like I said, if absolutely nobody volunteers to escort that robot, somebody has to do it, and it might as well be you if you're trying to win the game. One other thing that I wanted to mention that you can do, instead of purposely going for map control and cutoffs, is simply play the distraction role when you're attacking. So this means just push in and go for a big flank and attack their spawn. If you're attacking their spawn, they almost never expect that, especially when you're just starting the round, when your robot is still way over on your side of the map. If you're on their side of the map and you're shooting them all on the back and the side as they're coming off of spawn, you'll be a really big thorn in their side, and a lot of them will get distracted by this and they'll rotate back to try and kill you. And by doing this, you're playing that distraction sort of role. There's a lot of opportunity for a lot of kills when you do this, and you are technically helping your team because it's forcing the attention from the enemy team away from the robot and towards you in some relatively insignificant area of the map, or at least not objectively significant area of the map. So for me, those are basically the 3 different roles that you can take while attacking that are effective roles. There's either the escort role, which only one person has to do. Always remember that. Only one person ever has to be escorting at a given time. There's the map control and cutoff role, which is very, very important and will typically be the role that is actually winning the games, assuming you're doing it effectively. And then there's the distraction role, which can be a great, fun role to play because you get a lot of kills on people that aren't expecting you, and you're still helping out by forcing them to rotate back to kill you. Now, before we get into the defending tips, I want to share my favorite, more specific tip for attacking or escorting with the robot. And this tip is use smoke grenades for the escort. The big advantage that the defenders have over the people that are escorting the robot is once somebody is escorting the robot, they know an enemy is within that area, and they usually don't have cover, and therefore they're a free kill. They just pop out, they can see him, and they shoot him. Take that line of sight away from them, though, with a smoke grenade, and they just have a general idea where you are. They can kind of spray in the general direction, maybe, and maybe they'll get lucky, sometimes. But most of the time, they won't be able to see exactly where you are, and you can escort that robot so much easier if you use a smoke grenade. The most effective way that I've found is instead of throwing the smoke grenade right at the robot's feet, like I see a lot of people doing, that will only get you a few steps, because in a few steps, your robot will now be out of the smoke. So instead of throwing it right at your robot's feet, throw it a little bit in front of the robot, like 20 to 30 feet in front of the robot, depending on where the defense is really set up there. But basically between the robot and the defense is where you want to throw that smoke grenade, and this will get you many more steps with the robot before actually coming through that smoke grenade. So there you have it. Those are my tips for attacking. Now let's move on to defense. So with defense, there's 2 basic roles. There's the slayers, and then there's the hard defense. So the slayers are the guys that are running around, getting kills, basically annoying the enemy team and keeping them off of that escort, like keeping them away from the robot. That's a very important role. And the other role is hard defense, which are the people that are more so trying to actually disable the robot. They're setting up and they're trying to stop that robot in its tracks. Both roles are very effective, and I feel like they complement each other well. One thing that's really important to point out with these roles is they're not necessarily set roles. So if you're a slayer, that doesn't mean that you can't help disable the robot. On the other end of that, if you're playing hard defense, that doesn't mean that sometimes it's going to be advantageous for you to push out and try to get some kills on enemies. It definitely requires a lot of adaptation, especially if you aren't playing in an organized team. So when you're on defense, no matter which role you're playing, it is very important to know the route that the robot is going to take. And like I said at the beginning of the video, the robot always takes the exact same route on every map. So learn those routes. It shouldn't take you very long. After a game or 2 of Safeguard on each map, you should be able to know the route fairly well. Make sure you know those routes so that you can set up to play defense properly. If you know the robot goes hard to the left side of the map, then usually you don't want to go anywhere near the right side of the map. That's an objectively insignificant area. Even if you are picking off kills over there, it's really not doing anything for your team most of the time. Also, for both roles, it's very important to use cover to your advantage when you're on defense. That's the major advantage that the defense has in this game mode. Basically, the guys that are escorting, they have to come to you if they want to win the game. It's your job to stop them in their tracks, and because of this, you can get set up on cover knowing exactly where they're coming from, and you can have the advantage in those gunfights. So always be aware of cover when you're on defense. Now let's get into the specifics of each role. So for the Slayers, your main goal here is to push up, gain map control, be unpredictable, and get kills either on or around the robot area. A big key with this is you don't want to get too much tunnel vision on the people that are escorting the robot. A lot of guys that are trying to slay, they only care about the guys that are standing within a few feet of the robot, and because of that, they don't see the guys that are pushed up a little bit to the sides and shooting them from a different angle. So yes, it's important to kill the guys that are escorting the robot, but always be aware of the other guys that are going to be slightly off to the side or in a different area. Also, a little tip while you're slaying is it can often be very, very advantageous to push a little bit past the enemy's robot and get between their spawn and their robot. This is really unpredictable, and they don't usually expect you to be between them and their robot. And therefore, you can usually catch them like mid-sprint, and they really don't expect this. But it is very important to note that you don't want to push way past the robots. So let's just say they're escorting the robot, and they've almost got it to your team's portal. You aren't helping your team at all if you're pushed way in towards where the enemy's spawn is. If anything, you're going to be flipping their spawn and pushing it up closer to the robot and helping them out. So it's okay to push a little bit past the robot, but don't push way past their robot. You might just be helping them out in that scenario. Another thing with the Slayer role is whenever possible and safe, help your team to disable the robot if you've got something that is going to effectively do that. This is why if I am playing a Slayer role, I like to keep an XM53 on my class, or maybe a Black Cell sometimes, but I like the XM53 because I can be killing enemies, and then once I feel I've got a few seconds to spare, I can just quickly swap to my XM53, pop a shot into the robot without having to lock onto it, like I don't have to wait for it to lock on, just pop that shot into it, and then switch back to my gun and continue killing. I find this can be a really great way to encourage your team to continue to disable the robot. It seems like a lot of people, when the robot has full health, nobody's really interested in shooting it because it's so far from being disabled, which is where all the points come from. As soon as you start putting a little bit of damage into it though, I notice everybody else wants to shoot it as well. So just by taking a couple seconds to pop that one rocket into it between slaying enemies, it can often encourage your teammates to really shut that robot down quickly. Another thing that's really important with the Slayer role is to keep your hard defense alive, because usually the guys that are on hard defense will have like a Black Cell launcher in their hands. And if they run into an enemy in that situation, they are screwed because they can't really do anything to fight back against that enemy. So it's your job to keep the enemies also away from your hard defense guys. Keep them alive so they can use their rockets or whatever they're going to be using to effectively disable the robot. Now, let's move on to what you should do while you are playing hard defense. First off, your class setup is very important. What you're deciding to use to take out the robot makes a big difference. So you want to be using things like the Black Cell, the War Machine, the P06, Draken, or BRM, all of those with FMJ of course, or like Trip Mines. These are all great things to take out the Safeguard robot. Again, if you want the link to the video that I did where I tested all of the things and the fastest and most effective ways to take out the robot, I will leave a link down in the description below and you can check that one out. But just know that if you're playing hard defense, you want to be using these things that are effective at shutting down the robot. Next, you want to make sure you get set up with great cover somewhere on the path of the robot. This is where it's important to know the route of the robot. If you're set up on the wrong side of the map, that's not going to do anything to shut that robot down. You've got to be set up in the path of the robot, and you want to make sure you have cover as well. Obviously, you don't want to stand out in the open with a rocket launcher in your hand. Now, just like with the Slayer role, we don't want to get that tunnel vision on the robot. I see far too many guys playing hard defense. They've got a Black Cell launcher out, which is really ineffective against enemy players, and they don't realize they're being overrun and surrounded by enemy players, and now they're completely defenseless against those guys because they have a Black Cell launcher out. Even though with this playstyle it is your main goal to take out the robot, you only want to do this when you know you can safely do this. So that means clear the enemies off first, then pull out your black cell or your war machine or whatever you're going to be using to take that robot out. In addition to this, be aware of your surroundings. A lot of the time, you'll have enemies that are trying to flank the hard defense because usually the hard defense guys are free kills because they're standing there useless with a black cell, or they're just have so much tunnel vision towards the robot, you can just walk up and hit them in the back or something like that. So always be aware of your surroundings here. Take out the robot only when it's safe. So that's going to wrap it up for the roles for defense as well. So I've pretty much covered all of the tactics that I wanted to cover for Safeguard, but now I wanted to talk a little bit about score streaks. For anyone that's played a lot of Safeguard, you will know this mode is not the greatest for earning high score streaks. Even the lower score streaks can sometimes be difficult to earn. It takes like 10 kills, assuming you're not doing any other objective work. It takes 10 kills to earn a UAV, which is insane. So you probably don't want to be running the GI unit, the mothership, the Raps, the Wraith, the Hater. You probably don't want to be running that unless you're an extremely confident player. But even then, you're going to have to go on like a 25 kill streak to get some of these higher streaks. Instead, I highly recommend running the HCXD because oftentimes you have a ton of enemies grouped towards the robot. So there's a lot of potential for a lot of kills here, even though it doesn't do a ton of damage to the robot itself. The UAV, the counter UAV, the Dart, the Lightning Strike, Hellstorm, and Hardened Sentry. Anything higher than that, I find you just aren't going to be earning on a consistent basis. And even some of those ones, like the Lightning Strike and Hellstorm, you probably aren't going to be earning every single game you play on Safeguard. It's only something you're going to be earning once you go on like a beastly streak or something like that. So just be aware you want to avoid the higher streaks when playing Safeguard. This is, of course, unless they buff the score in the future. I'm really hoping they do, but in its current state, right now, it is not really viable to earn high streaks in Safeguard. So that's going to wrap it up for how to dominate Safeguard. Let me know in the comment section below which one of the game modes you'd like me to cover next for this series, and keep in mind I have already done Domination. If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.